Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who has spent this summer vacation sunbathing on the shores of hell.
Tim Longo.
They can't all be a bustle in your hedgerow, you know. Sometimes I just straight up lift it from what we're playing.
That was, spot on. Except for the sunbathing part. Not a good idea, apparently, in the shores of hell.
No, probably
terrifying
not.
Place. I will admit I'm still a little confused at, are we still on the moon in this episode?
I think so, but I think all right. So of course we're playing.
Were
Doom.
we ever on the moon?
I think we are on the. I think the first one maybe we're on the moon, and now we're on a moon of Mars, as I recall from the end of episode 1. It says you teleport, right? You step through the teleporter, and you're in. I think you're in Deimos, which is one of the moons of Mars, I believe.
I did not realize. Okay, that's just my ignorance. Then I didn't realize that. It's the smaller-most outpost, 2 moons of planet Mars. Yeah. Okay. So the outermost moon. Yeah.
Right. So you're on one of the moons, and I think hell is basically bleeding through.
Got it. Yeah.
I think is the thinking. So
we were on Mars first, and then we went to the moon on Mars, or attached to Mars. Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. No, I just didn't know what Deimos was, and now I know.
Yeah, Deimos and what, Phobos, I guess, is the other one.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So we're just going from location to location.
I will say, and this isn't something we talked about, the environment art does start to vary a lot more in this episode. Which is welcome. I mean, I think, and there are some places that there's just terrific flourishes. There's one of my favorites was in maybe the 4th or 5th level, where there's like a blue area where the walls and the floor and everything are all blue, and then you cross through a red area, which is pretty much the same way, but it's not a flat color. There's some texture to it, but it's mostly, it's almost all blue. It's just, 2 shades of blue or something like that. And I just love some of those weird touches where you're like, what could this possibly be?
Yeah.
Is this, hell bleeding through, or what's going on here? But, and you start seeing more stuff about the UAC, which is the corporation that does the.
I just looked that up. Union
Aerospace Corporation, right? Something. Yeah.
It's the hell bleeding through thing definitely hits harder in this episode. There's a lot more gothic castle-y kind of looking things, and a lot more skulls on the wall, and scrolling textures of faces, and intestinal floors here and there, so they're definitely having fun with the theme of that. And one thing we were talking about in pre-show that I looked up, and I just was curious on how the level design broke down for the game. The first episode was largely done by John Romero, and the second episode was largely done by Sandy Peterson. So 2 different level designers, which will give a different feel and style. And it's pretty clear playing them back to back. Well, almost back to back. We did skip a week, as people know by now. But you can tell the stylistic differences of the 2 level designers, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Not even just the visuals, like you said, but even just the level design itself. There's definitely, Sandy seems to like teleporters and switches and a lot of moving platforms,
Yeah. And a lot less obvious symmetry. There's symmetry sort of in smaller parts, but I feel like John's were maybe a little bit more in that regard. Not entirely, but you can definitely feel it in the overall level design, I think.
That's a good point. I think there's a couple, like in maybe last couple levels of this episode, there were a couple sections that felt like they were intentionally asymmetrical and kind of weird from a flow perspective. And my headcanon on that is they were another sort of element of hell bleeding through, where geometry didn't make as much sense, and hallways were bleeding into other hallways, and it was very like chaotic,
Right.
geometry.
Yeah.
Which felt
almost
like
sort of Inception-like or something, where just this thing smashing into that thing, and it's just kind of what's happening now. This is the world we live in now. Yeah, it's definitely. It was interesting to see that. I mean, I had picked up that the design felt very different, but I had not looked into who the level designer was, because my recollection had just been, it was John Romero who did most of the level design. But these levels were actually started, many of them by Tom Hall, and then made into full levels by Sandy Peterson. Another thing that I saw happening was a lot more non-critical path key use and things like that, like having to go back to an area that you don't actually need to go into. It's not on the critical path. You can just go find it. It felt a lot more exploratory. And I was thinking too, having had some time to reflect on it, one of the things that's really different about me playing it this time is I'm playing it way faster. And, I'm going through levels in a couple, 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and one, I'm rarely getting lost, although some of the levels here I did, and spent a long time trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. In some cases, it's just like, I missed that button. I didn't see the button on the wall that I was supposed to hit, that raised some platform or something like that. But I can remember back in the day how slowly I went through everything, how slowly and carefully I went through the levels, like, ducking around a corner, seeing how many, imps and shotgun dudes are behind it, and then kind of popping out, taking off one at a time, and kind of not dodging and weaving to go through them. I guess it's just... having played I've played Doom 2 a couple, 3 times now through. So I think I got to the point where I'm just used to playing it more quickly, but I definitely was remembering, the first time I played this, I played it very methodically and not at all at the pace I think it's meant to be played.
Right. It'd be interesting to know, we'll never kind of be able to have this statistic, but hypothetically, how many people share that experience, to be honest. Because my reaction to what you're saying is that I think Doom, in the time that it came out, like we talked about in the first episode, was so revelatory and so, I'll use the I word, immersive, and kind of like, whoa, this is crazy, that you added a lot of your own fear and caution to the moment to moment. I know I did back then as well. I genuinely play that way, in most games, but playing this now for us, like, it's a different time, right? And we're different gamers, and the industry's different, and shooters are different. And so it's almost, for me, it's been, to sort of support your point, but with a slightly different spin, it's almost been liberating to just play so fast, because it's not that I don't care, but we're playing it for the podcast, and I'm kind of like, I'm experimenting more, and I'm not sweating the small details, like I usually do. I'm just kind of having fun barnstorming through. And then, as I've said before, I haven't played the modern reboot, in 2016 reboot. But my understanding is the core design of that game, the loop of that game, kind of encourages / forces you to play quickly and to move in on enemies because of how the mechanics are built. And so it's almost like they took that spiritual feeling that you're talking about playing now, playing it fast is sort of the way it's meant to be played, though it is optional in this original one we're playing. And they embraced it, because it sort of became the core identity of what Doom is. It's that fast and furious, and like just really fast. The amount of time you can zip from one side of a level to another is just hilarious.
Yeah, it's absolutely unreal, right? I mean, just how quickly this game moves compared to where we are today. And of course, a lot of that impact has been things like adding cover, for example, or increasing lethality, at least from the enemies. I mean, that to sort of increase difficulty. Also, I think a lot more, and this may be partly because of the way physics engines work, a lot more weapons are instant hit weapons in modern shooters. So you have less. I mean, you basically have no time if you're out. You can't be out there running around to get shot at. Where here, imps and cacodemons or whatever throw fireballs at you, but you have time to move out of the way if you're paying attention. And sometimes I've moved out of the way, and I'm used to faster moving projectiles, and I move back into the firing lane because I'm like, it should have been by me already, right? Just because games are just a little bit different feeling today. So I don't know what that is. I mean, certainly you could do that in shooters, but I think it is more common to do just sort of line of sight style checking, and can I hit my target? Okay, good, bang, happens immediately. It seems more common today.
That's an interesting. Yeah, we didn't talk about that as a topic in pre-show, but it is.
Yeah, I'm just hitting all the topics we didn't talk about.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, it's a good organic question though, because it is true. Like, why? And we've actually danced around this macro topic a few times, and I'm just on the flying this right now. But to your point about like modern shooters, and there's definitely the physics side of it. I think that we've talked a lot about, especially harder core genres like shooters becoming more casual or more broad market. And so they tend to slow them down, like a game this fast for a broader market, though I would say like Quake 3 maybe kind of got to an apex, right? And then after that, they started slowing down more as I think more people were playing them. I think I'm just guessing another possible influence could have been console gaming. Mm-hmm. Console gaming would slow shooters down specifically, and Halo being a really good example of a success case for that, right? And then that kind of bleeding back into PC for better or for worse. And then the other thing that we've talked about it from time to time, as the industry has changed and as the medium has gotten more expensive to create an experience within, specifically a level, if we were to make a 3-minute level today, that would be verboten. I mean, that's a travesty, because it's like you need people to play levels for a while. They need to be worth it. You're putting a lot of time, and unless the game design, and this isn't necessarily, I'm not saying this is a true statement overall, because there's really clever games out there that get, especially roguelikes, that are getting a lot of interesting use out of small amounts of playtime. But I'm just talking the traditional AAA kind of shooters today, right? You want a big experience, you want multiple, tens of minutes at least, and half hour, right, to a level. And it's just not as common to have something that you can go through so quickly like these. I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting. That's a fascinating question of that progression.
It also it takes a lot longer to build the geometry these days, and we are typically more narrative focused. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily. Not necessarily in a true sort of story. We're telling you a story as you go through the level, although that does happen. Gears of War, for example, it has a new game out. I guess that's over the shoulder, but same kind of feel.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but it's like, there's a kind of story to the level, even if there isn't an explicit story to a level these days, right? And here, there isn't really necessarily a story to the level. It's, how can I pop up some scares, make you get kind of lost, have you run back and forth and try to figure out, where am I going to find this key that I'm looking for? There's very little in the way of sort of even the environment telling you a story of what this place is, with rare exceptions. It's like you walk into a room, and maybe level 3 or 4, in this episode, which is clearly a warehouse. It's all boxes, right? So there are occasionally environmental settings where like, oh, I can tell what this is. And that might tell you a little bit of story, but there's really not a lot, because there's not a lot of performance to be able to throw in extra stuff, right? Oh, that's all BSP carving. And it's just, there's not a lot of room for props that would tell more of a story. So there's just a lot of things that kind of connect to that one issue, I think, that have changed pretty dramatically in the last 20-ish years, 25 years.
Well, yeah, that's the other side of what I was saying earlier too, is that it takes longer to make a level. It's also what's just much more expensive, you know,
Right.
and you have many more people, right? And in this case, you had this is old school, old fashioned 3D level design where it's like this is raw. Like you said, there's not really a story per se. There's minimal stuff, but this is just raw level design.
Yeah.
You know, they're using an AutoCAD kind of, you know, view to create a top down and then run through it, and it's just whatever's coming to their mind. You know, there's not really much to it. So I'm not saying it's easy to do because these levels, you know, there's still a talent to it, but the barrier of entry for and cost for doing this is much different. And we even talked.
Oh, right. You bang out a level in a day in this time. Yeah.
And we also talked about the business model, how different it is for this particular game and in this era, you know, and now it's like I said, it's a $60 box product, you know, so there's certain expectations that whomever has, right?
Right.
Come from all sorts of directions. And I don't even want to comment on that, but it's just a different time, you know? And so hence, long story short, you know, you slow things down. I could just be interesting to sort of map over time that the speed of the shooter. And you see especially there's some interesting indie projects. There's a Quake style looking one it's
a Devil Daggers or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. There's a couple of them actually that are sort of that nostalgic look at the sort of Quake era. And they're obviously coming back to that, like, super fast, you know, just blinding fast, you know, speed. And because people miss it, right? Because I don't want to say dumbed down, but it's just it's made differently for a different goal, you know. And it's nice to see people kind of wanting to bring some of this back. And it's just, again, surprising to play this and see how fast it was from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely is a thing, but it is still that weird. There's still the weird thing of like, okay, I move around really fast, but the enemies don't move super fast.
Yeah.
You know, right? So it's like it's a superpower fantasy in that respect. That's the edge that you have, is that if you're skilled, you can wade right into them and do okay. As long as you don't get surrounded by a bunch of, you know, pinky demons or something like that, you're probably going to be all right. Which did happen to me. So it's a true story. R.I.P. that Doom guy. So
yeah. I think I know the section you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I got pretty worked in one spot. But yeah, it's also, there's also, it's funny because I can totally remember back in the day going and getting to the end of the first level of all of them and having the like time be like a minute or a minute and a half or whatever it is, and being like, are you kidding? And it was like 15 minutes for me or something ridiculous, right? Because I also want to go find all the secrets and et cetera, right? I'm getting to know the place. You know, it's, I don't know, I can remember that kind of came back to me. Those sorts of things have been coming back to me over the last couple of weeks while we've been off and playing this. So anyway.
Well, I think back in the day you wanted to live in the space longer because it was so crazy, you know, that this game was existing, you know.
Yeah.
It's still such a huge jump from Wolfenstein, even though it's the same people, and you wanted to kind of explore every nook and cranny, you know, because you wanted to kind of untap the potential of the level. And I'm not, because I'm going so fast, I'm definitely missing stuff for sure. But that's one thing, coming back to this episode, that you mentioned already, that I did really appreciate is, you know, the key card paradigm, if you will, or whatever, the key card style that they've been using. It's, you know, and they even put it on your HUD so you have a full awareness of which cards you have. It's cool that Sandy's playing around, like you said, with nonlinear and optional stuff with those. Not every level. Some levels you need all three, but in some cases, a key card is just to go get a special weapon or something.
Right.
Not even in a secret, but just like a wing of the command center or whatever. Forgetting all the names, although I have it up here. Yeah. Or like the refinery or something like that. And there was a little more theming, like you said, going on here, but it was cool to see that that use. The one segue for that for me though is when you start fooling around with those rules and mixing them up that much, then sometimes if you're not good at letting the player know that things have been changing, especially if it changes that rule set from level to level, then you may think you need to be going to find all 3 keys and you don't actually need to. So it's tricky to have, unless you have which this game doesn't have, an objective screen or something, right? Where you know what your task is. Right. That's the solution that, many games use. But, so it was cool that you didn't need, I kind of accidentally happened into, I didn't need all the keys. I found the exit. Oh, okay. I just needed this one, or I didn't even need any keys. So I feel like there was at least one level where I didn't even need, any of the 3 keys. But I didn't know, so there's that discovery that was just sort of of its time, and that's fine. But, today you'd want to really telegraph to the player, when that rule set's changing.
Do you think that sort of unsettling thing of not knowing where to go next and changing up those rules is just part and parcel of Sandy Peterson's approach? I don't think we mentioned before his Call of Cthulhu-ness. Oh yeah. No, we talked about that in pre-show. Yeah. He was a co-author of the Call of Cthulhu pen and paper role-playing game, which is one of my favorites. I think you're a fan too, right? Of that? Oh, I am. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't play a ton back with the original, but then I bought the 3rd edition source book or whatever, and I don't think I even ever played it, but I have it still. So hit me up.
Yeah, no, I do. I have multiple editions actually. I was kind of collecting them for a while, and luckily stopped myself from getting all of them. But yeah, there is a bit of role playingness to it, is what you mean?
Yeah, or even just the never being entirely sure what the world's about, right? I mean, there's both setting and rules implications, I think, for Call of Cthulhu, of the rules can be you can be a little surprised by the effects of the rules maybe, but also the world is strange. So it makes sense that maybe some of that stuff would be sort of sprung upon you in that way.
Mm-hmm. So. But I'd also think that to the role-playing side, I do feel like though, like you said, it's light on, fictional sense of place. There was more going on in this episode than the first episode. As far as, like you said, the introduction of the UAC and this concept of, there's a lot of laboratory and refinery and containment area and spawning vats. I'm just reading some of the list of the names. And though it wasn't obviously realistic geometry, there was a sense of not a cohesive through line to all the levels, but more so than the previous one was just sort of bases, buildings in a base,
right. Yeah.
A Martian base on a moon. And this had some sense of they're spawning demons here, and there's sort of just a little bit more going on, I thought in that case. And so maybe that's some of his influence for sure. And as a mini call out to a game we may play someday far in the future, I don't know, but Quake 1, Sandy Peterson also worked on, and the lore/fiction side of that, which is also minimal, but the enemies you fight, a lot of it is very, very heavily based on Cthulhu and cosmic horror stuff. So his
for sure. I mean, you end up fighting the final boss there is that
Shub-Niggurath or whatever.
Yeah, Shub-Niggurath thing. Yeah. Very, very Cthulhu. Yeah, and that's an influence you also see, in Half-Life, another shooter we've already played, right? With the whole, was it Zen, I guess, and the sort of bleed through of the Zen monsters and all that stuff. So definitely very cosmic horror there as well. So it's just super interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up about the level design, in pre-show to talk about it, because it does feel really, really different from the first set to me. And I wasn't quite able to put my finger on that. Maybe because there's a couple weeks in between playing it, but anyway, cool.
Well, and I'm always interested to know, because some games structure wise, they'll have multiple level designers working on the same episode, right? And in id's case, they chose, for whatever reason, maybe we'll find out how someday, to have a level designer work on the whole episode. Obviously, because at that time, like you said, it's faster to make levels, so you could put one person on the whole episode. But more often than not, you're kind of bouncing around, and you have level designers working on multiple episodes, and they each tend to, as level design discipline kind of matured, different level designers had specialties, or like were better at certain kinds of levels than others. So you'd kind of put them on the level that was heavily puzzle based or something, and that person would do a lot of those kinds. And that's something that we kind of learned over time, versus like expecting one level designer to be good at everything. Like one level designer is really good at combat encounters, and so you know what I mean.
Right.
So in this case, they just had somebody work on the whole thing. And there, I agree with you. Before I looked it up, there was something I couldn't put my finger on too that felt holistically different in this whole episode. And two small examples that I mentioned in pre-show too were the teleporter use, which might be thematic to some degree as well, but definitely level design stuff, and a lot of switches and dynamic platforms and stairways. So there was a lot, like the levels felt more alive and a lot more activity going on. And then the teleporters added this level of kind of mystery and shock and momentary discombobulation, like, where am I? And so you kind of pop open your map and you see where you pop to, and so that was kind of an interesting element that wasn't, I don't believe that there were any teleporters in the first episode. Am I right on that?
I don't think so. I mean, the thing ends with
just
one, but
end, right?
Yeah, I think maybe that might be it.
Part of the plan, or maybe that was the level design.
I suspect probably something like tech. I always suspect that when because we also talked about the limited sort of relative number of enemies and things like that, so we'll segue to that in a minute. I think that's probably, hey, we got this together, let's get that out there and then keep working, right? Because another thing we were talking about, sort of the speed of the monsters and all that stuff. The speed of this model of distribution was also a lot slower. This was discs being copied and handed around and things like that. It was the internet was not in everybody's home by any means in 1993, 4, whatever. So it definitely, it's a whole thing.
I remember going to the supermarket, and supermarkets occasionally would have just like one of those spinning wire racks somewhere in the corner of like shareware of all sorts of weird stuff, right? Games, but also like edutainment, or I don't know, word processors,
print shops, whatever.
Just on a single disc and just a cardboard sleeve, shrink wrapped. And I remember just going and spinning that thing every time I go to the with my parents to the supermarket, and Doom's usually there. It was usually there. This was pre that, but or this was post that, but anyway, I mean, the distribution was crazy. I mean, and this one caught on by like wildflower. Jeez,
you can get there, man. Have you been hiking a lot, like wildflowers?
Like wildfire. And so it also ended up being OEM'd, I think, a lot too, right? It started to get.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You get it with whatever card or machine. It was with magazines, and there were a lot of different weird ways. Not every game got that luxury, but this one kind of got spread around quickly.
But even there, of course, you're talking about distribution on the speed of somebody buying a machine or buying a magazine, right? Once a month, right? So it's still by the time like Quake Test came out, that was a big deal. That was internet based, that everybody was downloading Quake Test, which was the alpha test of the Quake rendering. They wanted to test it on a variety of cards and things like that, because cards are becoming a thing. Or just a variety of systems, even. Something now that Steam basically automates. They just keep track of what everybody has, I guess. But back then you had to figure out a way to gather that information. So, lots of Anyway, we'll sideline Quake for now. But even in over a handful of years between Doom 2, and then Quake, there are big changes in the model because the internet becomes much more common, and download speeds or connection speeds were still not great, but they don't really have to be when you're downloading 3 or 4 floppies worth of stuff. So
yeah,
I
did want to.
You're talking about things in terms of a few megabytes rather than a few gigabytes, right? So
right. I did want to call out a couple specific moments in this, just the single moments in this episode, in a couple levels that I did have in my notes that I thought were nice and worth mentioning. One was the intro of the. Sorry, the dogs. Hey guys, sorry, audience. The Cacodemon, is that what you said it's called?
Yeah, the beholder looking thing.
Beholder, yeah. So the intro of that was cool. That first room, where you see it, and it's like pacing behind bars, or through slats in that one room, and it can shoot at you, and you can shoot at it, but it's not like in your face, and you're kind of like, what is that thing, and
yeah.
For the first time, seeing that for the first time, is a crazy moment, and it's a clever and pretty typical intro to give you a taste of something without it being, because the part of the AI of that creature, it does come pretty close to you if you're not being blocked by something. And so that was a good safer way to intro that, but it was a cool spooky moment. Another one I wanted to mention was there's a specific mini puzzle that I really appreciated. I think it was a key card across
with the ceiling.
The ceiling puzzle,
yeah,
so good.
Yeah, that's pretty early. That's maybe level 2 or something like that.
Or something, but it's very simple design and very simple puzzle, but very, I thought, elegant and brilliant.
Yeah, you want to describe the mechanic of it?
Yeah, so you walk up to this room where there's a probably, I don't remember if it's lava or toxic.
It's toxic, yeah. It's the green stuff.
And so you can't get to the key on the other side, so there's no pathway. And so and the key is too far off the toxic sludge to be able to reach it. Yeah,
there's like a half height or something that you're allowed to get things in, but yeah, it's too high.
So
the niche is too high.
You clearly need to find some pathway to get across there. And so you walk up near it, and I found it accidentally. The first block, a block raises, or actually an L-shaped block raises from the sludge to give you a little bit closer access, but not enough access to the key. And then if you keep going in a certain direction, then more and more blocks will rise up. And at first I didn't realize why they were rising up, where they were rising up. But if you look at the ceiling, there's a light pattern that's at the same essentially mirror image of the blocks coming up from the sludge that you need to walk through. And so if you follow that light pattern from the ceiling, the blocks will rise up to allow you to kind of take the snaking route to the key. And so, you can definitely brute force and kind of accidentally find the right path if you wanted to. And, it would physically work, and you would never need to see the correlation to the ceiling. But I just thought, once you have that little revelatory moment in a game like this, it was kind of a neat moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unexpected. There's some cool tech with that, right? There's these moving platforms and things like that we've already kind of alluded to. And also the ceiling sort of is set in a little bit. So they're making good use of BSP carving out little bits here and there for detail, which is all really cool. The other thing is that, and this kind of brings us back to Sandy Peterson. That also feels like a DM sort of thing too, to make puzzles and environmental puzzles and things like that, and routes a thing. And that's definitely an old school RPG thing to do. It's not something that I think you find commonly anymore. But little puzzles like that would not be uncommon in something like Tomb of Horrors, right? Something from that kind of era of RPG design, which Sandy is sort of that's his era. That's when he started. Cthulhu, you said, was 81. So it's just interesting to feel that sort of impact of maybe a little bleeds through from role-playing games, which, to call back, is something Tom Hall talked about when we talked about Anachronox as well. So it's we know that's what they did. that was one of their hobbies, and that they like to play D&D, I think, together. So definitely seeing both Sandy Peterson's influence in those sorts of things, but also just kind of the team being an interest of theirs. I feel like it comes through.
Yeah. The last mini moment I wanted to mention, I think, okay, I'm going to forget which one it was. It might have been Halls of the Damned, so maybe 6. One of the levels opens up with this really long, kind of dark room, and at the end of it, there's 2 alcoves that are lit up but flickering with enemies, different enemy. One's a marine guy, and one's maybe just an imp. But I was really appreciative of the lighting. I feel like lighting was used a lot more in this episode as well. Mm-hmm. And you kind of you come in, and it's a pretty grand, I think maybe like stone looking texture, really grand room. And then you see these, and they haven't been alerted yet until you really move. If you just stay still and don't do anything, then they'll just stay in their light, and it's just flickering. So for the reason I bring this one up is that, with good sort of composition in level design and sort of architecture, if you will, you can do a lot with just the way that things are laid out in that way. And then you throw some interesting lighting in there. And it really has a good sense of drama in that one section. And that was how the level opened. Literally, I think the load screen bleeds up or whatever, and then you're standing there, and there are these 2 enemies standing still, flickering, and you hear them, but they haven't seen you yet or something. So that was another nice little section I wanted to mention. So
yeah, I like too how the AI plays into that. I think the AI is very clear about its rules and things like that in terms of what activates an AI and things like that. There's line of sight, but also audio, and I feel like the designers, as you go along, you feel like they have a better handle on, I can get this effect to happen because I know how all of this works. So the moment I'm thinking of, I already alluded to it earlier, was you've crossed some toxic sludge. Maybe you've got a radiation suit, and there's a couple of health boxes, and you come around a corner, and there's an invisible pinky coming at you. And I say invisible, but you can tell that they're there. They have this sort of hazy, predator-like thing that's covering them. And so this invisible pinky demon's coming at you, and what you don't know is that as soon as you shoot or use your chainsaw or whatever, it's going to alert a dozen other pinkies that are hidden in these wings in the other room, and another maybe 1 or 2 invisible ones. And suddenly you've got a big problem. And it's a great moment because it plays off exactly on how the AI works. And you maybe could have predicted it was a possibility, but the designer's definitely playing off what they know about how these things trigger. Whether that trigger is even explicit, I don't know if the AI actually listens for sounds. I sort of feel like maybe it does, but listens for sounds, knows when a sound is emitted from the player near them or something. But so I'm sure the sound propagation model is not complicated. But yeah, it's a really neat moment, and it really plays into some of the strengths. And as you had mentioned at one point, that there's more enemies now in this level. You're dealing with more enemies at a given time, which is another way that the game can sort of ramp challenge and difficulty and even early emergent behavior from its enemies. For example, they although enemies of one within a particular type can't harm one another, they can harm any other type of enemy. And whatever hurts an enemy in Doom is now that guy's enemy. So if an imp hits a cacodemon with its fireball, that cacodemon will turn on the imp. There is no brotherhood in hell, apparently. And so you can actually use that to your advantage at times. You come into a room with a ton of pinkies and some imps behind them, and you just want to wait as long as you can for the imps to start drawing the pinkies off as they try to fire at you, or even to just line them up in between you. So because you know that projectile is going to come on a straight line to you, so you just kind of use that to your advantage. I don't know. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it's cool to see like the humanoid marine kind of guys too, right? Sometimes that'll happen to them, and then they'll get killed by some of the demons, and you have a good little storytelling moment there. And then even in some of the visual storytelling later in this episode, some of the demons' bodies are hanging around. So you see human bodies for a little while, but then the demon bodies are hanging around. So you're like, well,
oh, right, yeah.
Killing these demons. I guess other demons are killing, so.
Right, yeah.
It's like, and in fact, later, like the last level or two, you see the Baron bodies hanging.
Yeah.
And that was the boss.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So you're like, what is killing the Baron? So it's great escalation over the course of things for sure. And then the added demons, like especially the lost souls, I thought were interesting. We talked about this in pre-show where they seem to be, maybe because they're flying, they seem to be more impacted by knockback from like shotguns and stuff. So you can really fool with that. I didn't anticipate seeing, because I don't think I got this far. I think only played the first episode when I played it back in the day. So I'm in uncharted territory now. And so I didn't anticipate things like knockback in this game, and when you hit a lost soul with a shotgun, they fly pretty far back. And then even the stun locking that happens with things like the chain gun and stuff, which is also an unanticipated, design that is, pretty nuanced for this, going from Wolfenstein to this. That's a cool, maybe byproduct of sort of animation locks or stun locking or something like that. I'd like to think it would be intentional, but it's a cool little thing to exploit for sure.
Yeah, they're using more frames of animation for different things as well. So I think they're able to play with a little bit more rules in their enemies. So they can have a separate animation, which is the head of the whatever they're calling, the flying imps, the flying skull things. What are those called again? Lost souls. Yeah. There's one where if you stun lock it, hit it with a shotgun, whatever, it sort of gets, as it adds its knockback, it turns off to a weird angle that looks a little odd. There's a lot of clear communication of state that way, so that you can actually read some of the rules that I was talking about earlier on what's going on with them. Like, oh, I can see what it's about to do. Which I feel like was a really important part of enemy design moving on from here is communicating what the state of the enemies were. We'll talk about it. Maybe someday we'll get to like Splinter Cell, because I know that that's a game that spends a lot of effort on having appropriate voice lines for what the enemies are thinking and doing. And it's just literally signifying every state that they could be in, so you can make decisions about it. Here, I think they're doing a lot of that visually with fairly little animation, but it's there. It's like, oh, it's clearly in a knockback state. I'm clearly, the chainsaw is clearly chopping into the pinky demon. Oh, I've stun locked the caca demon. There's just every enemy seems to have a little touch of that. And that would become really, really important as time went on. So
yeah. No, it's a good example of that in this genre. And I'm trying to think, influences for id, things as simple as Nintendo, right? Being really good at enemy telegraphing and with 2D animations, with 2D pixel animations, that we all grew up on. And some of these guys are not too far off from our age. So they would have been playing the same stuff. And even not enemy related, but the power up that reveals the map, the whole map.
Right.
That's Zelda 101 stuff, so it's like you see little hints here and there stuff that, everyone's stealing from everyone else, but primarily Nintendo. But yeah, and that Lost Soul also has a tell right when it's about to charge you, because that's kind of its main attack, is it kind of thrusts towards you,
right?
And it does this kind of growl kind of thing, and so that's also a pretty clear indication to sidestep at that point. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, that nuances of tuning and balancing of that stuff that I just forgot or just didn't anticipate, being in this game. I just always, in my mind, in the back of my head, I always remember it being fairly simple in pretty much every way. Just kind of the technology was what was so impressive, but there's more game design going on here that bears mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it bleeds through everywhere, much like hell, into our world.
Huh. Good segue.
I came all the way full circle. All right. Well, I think we want to call it there for tonight and go to feedback.
Yeah, let's do it. It's a good,
all right.
Good moment. Good
moment to move on. I am going to first read a review, because I didn't think about it and put it in yours. So we'll get to that, get to the email next. But first thing is, we've got a review up on the podcast app. It's a great way for us to reach new listeners, let new people know about the podcast. It's simply called Best Game Podcast by Full Tilted. Absolutely love this podcast. Both game developers are excellent and have amazing insights on each game they deep dive into. So glad they finally did Deus Ex, which I listened to on a long flight. Please keep doing this incredible show, and thank you for your time and expertise. And then would love to hear the hosts take on Bard's Tale Remastered Trilogy, Prey, and System Shock 2. Well, System Shock 2, I can say go back to the very beginning. It's still in the feed. That was our first game ever. And we did talk about the new Prey in connection with what? Something recently. Deus Ex. Yeah, Deus Ex. But Bard's Tale is one we've actually talked about as a possibility. So that may happen at some point.
Yeah, I think it has to. It's a seminal RPG of its kind. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I'd like to play personally, I'd like to play an RPG that's older like that. We've played some old. I'm trying to think, but that one goes pretty far back. I mean, it's that's
a long ways ago. Yeah,
the Beholder style, tile based. Move one step at a time. Cardinal directions. So I think, and of that ilk, I think that's probably the one to play versus Eye of the Beholder. I think that was before the Beholder, in fact.
Well, thank you, Full Tilted. Yeah, I think Bard's Tale goes back to like 86, I want to say. I played it a long, long time ago, but I'm going to look now because I've got to know.
Got it.
1985. Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go.
I think one of the oldest ones. What's the oldest thing we've played so far? Would it be King's Quest or something like that?
Super Metroid was 86. King's Quest is maybe a little earlier. Yeah,
83.
83, anyway. I want to say. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably the oldest thing we've played.
Anytime
no, that's Wizards and the Princess. It says as a King's Quest game. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Now I'm distracted.
Anytime we get praise for a podcast, I'm always flabbergasted and very humbled and thankful, but humbled because we're just talking, and I'm glad people get something from it. I have fun doing it, but thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Full Tilted, and look forward to someday us getting to probably one of the Bard's Tales. We probably will not play all three, but something to look forward to. All right, now we're going to dip into the email bucket, and you, sir, you had to do it. You had to bring up that Pokemon stuff again. Yeah. And so we are going to split the two emails. I'll read one in between, but we do have a couple of emails for you to read about Pokemon. People are sending email to devgameclub@gmail.com, and we do try to read basically all of it here. Sometimes sometimes it just doesn't fit in, but I'm making Tim read all the Pokemon stuff as punishment.
Punishment, yeah.
For waving the red meat.
Yeah, this will probably be our. We'll start closing down. This will be our last. I won't open that Pandora's box anymore. I'm closing it. So after this episode, we'll move on, because this is a never-ending deep hole that I love, but there's got to be a time to stop at some point. So yeah, and these are a couple of these coming from our some of our hardcore listeners. So regular. So email number 1 with a producer note that says, "You asked for it." Subject: "Darn those crazy Pokemon people. Sorry, fans." From Gothic Chocobo. The Gothic Chocobo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Tim Talk. Firstly, Raichu, yeah, okay, is Pikachu's evolution. Okay, right? Okay, I do remember that now that he's saying it. And now the IV-EV talk. Oh, that's right. There's the EV and then there's the EV. I'm not sure when I was first aware of EV-IV training. However, it has been a few generations, so I would say I've probably known about it since the 4th or 5th generation of Pokemon games. From the quick searching I did, it sounds like the games were data mined, and according to Bulbapedia, I love that's the name, because Bulbasaur is the best. IVs have been officially known as innate strengths in Japan since Pokemon Gold and Silver, November 99. And a user on Reddit mentions that they first heard the term on the Pokemon fan site called the Pokemon Masters in 1999. You could also see the change in stats using the box trick, which quote unquote box trick, which involves putting a Pokemon in the PC and then removing them to deliberately recalculate the Pokemon stats, as the stats were not stored when the Pokemon is put in the PC, but when they are recalculated from the Pokemon's level, EVs and IVs, base stats, and from Gen 3 onward, nature. The box trick is handy for when you have used a level 100 Pokemon in battles, as the earlier games, the stats were only recalculated when the Pokemon leveled up or evolved. Personally, once I knew about it, I did not research it further or use my knowledge of it in my gameplay, which is probably why I can't remember when exactly I learned about it. Otherwise, I would probably be able to tell you the first Pokemon that I IV trained, because it does not fit with my playstyle. From what I have heard about EV-IV training, it tends to be a thing that multiplayer battle-focused players use when they play. However, it seems popular to just hack perfect IV Pokemon into your game if you are mostly playing to battle. That makes a lot of sense. Multiplayer.
I'm gonna pause right there just to say this is all in response to you saying, when did you know? Like, when did people know and could act on this thing that was this system that was in the game that was hidden? And so there's a lot of detail about that. Anyway,
I just love, but that's like the beauty of our medium is this kind of stuff happens, right? Like
it's true. Yeah.
Not like a film or something or a book where you can data mine something. There's no code, right? It's just, it's just a complicated thing where, sometimes developers don't intend for certain systems to be, exposed, but fans find a way, and they do the math, and especially if it's a good game like Pokemon, and they become obsessed with it, And again, my version of this is WoW.
The second part, I will say, speaks to a particular strength that we didn't dwell on much, just because we're playing this game so much longer after the time, but it does sort of talk about the sort of social nature that Nintendo really tried to emphasize. We didn't do any trading, for example, right? Because we weren't in the same place, and et cetera. But that was a thing in the manual. Here's how you trade. You get this cable and you do this. Tell your friends, whatever, battle in the battle mode or whatever. So this next part kind of speaks to that a little bit.
Yeah, huge. That's a huge thing. That, not to rehash the Pokemon stuff, but that was just a game changer for this game. So he goes on to say, I would say that the player is exposed to the system as a way of making the player feel feel like each Pokemon is growing differently, or your Pokemon is growing differently to your friend's Pokemon. So when playing Red Blue, if you caught a Jigglypuff before Mount Moon and trained it up through Mount Moon, it would have more effort points in defense and speed because of it. All of the Geodudes and Zubats you would be fighting throughout the cave. But if your friend who had also caught a Jigglypuff before Mount Moon had not used their Jigglypuff in Mount Moon, and instead they trained it up on Route 24 or 24/25, their Jigglypuff would have more effort points in special and speed because of the Oddish and Bellsprout and Caterpie, Weedle, Pidgey that they were fighting. When you and your friends battle your Jigglypuff would have higher defense stat, but their Jigglypuff would have a higher speed stat. And so your Jigglypuff would be able to take more hits from the same move than their Jigglypuff. Obviously, from such a small section, the difference would be negligible. But over the course of the game, depending on what Pokemon you and your friends battle against, your respective Jigglypuff would grow and feel different. You can also interact with the system using the vitamins, and from Gen 3 Pokemon could hold items that increase IV gain. And this is all without mentioning Pokerus, a virus introduced in the second generation, which doubled EV/IV gain if a Pokemon caught it. However, catching it was rarer than finding a shiny. Many thanks, Gothic Chocobo. No, many thanks to you, Gothic Chocobo. That Jigglypuff monologue.
Well, I knew he'd get you with the Jigglypuff. He chose the right Pokemon.
That's amazing. No, but that, ladies and gentlemen, is systems-driven gaming. Game development. That is, that is a perfect example of developers doing what they should do, making a game highly systemic, and then making it, like Brett said earlier, social. And so the systems have unintended, consequences based on how they all clash together, and thus you have differences, and your experiences can be very different. The ultimate example of that being like a highly systemic game, like an open world game or something, where everyone's story of how they played is very different. So yeah, it's good breakdown, Gothic. Thank you. And we will be almost closing the book on this one.
Yes, almost. We got one more. It's I think the social aspect is what can drive that forward. It gives you that chance to have a mystery. Like, wait a minute, why is your, I guess, Jigglypuff different from my Jigglypuff? What did you do? Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about that, is it's a design which naturally lends itself to communication, right, with somebody else who's played the game. I mean, to asking questions. And you just know there are game designers out there today who are working today who had this experience, and that's what got them into being game developers. So yeah, I'm sure there are. I probably work with some. We don't always necessarily talk about that when we meet fellow developers. Like, what was your game?
What were the games that got you? Yeah. I mean, the most of the time, the interesting thing, and the reason I did ask my Pandora's box question and the EVs and IVs stuff that's interesting to me is almost all of the time developers intentionally don't surface these systems to players, because they, like you just said, they want people to talk about, hey, how did you play, or what happened to you, or how did you get your Jigglypuff to do that? They want that sort of speculation to happen. So, and Nintendo actually is fairly notorious for not revealing a lot of information to the player. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And the, Nintendo UI is generally a lot slimmer than most games. And they don't,
that's a good point.
They don't reveal a lot to you because they want people to have that water cooler talk, the mystery. They want people to, speculate and guess and talk about it. There's actually, there was a Mario Maker 2 example that I can't remember. Anyway, there was a recent example of I think Mario Maker 2, a game that just released fairly recently, where clearly they're taking things away from the players to prevent them from knowing too much. because they.
I mean, that's Patrick Klepek's beat over at Waypoint. He's been doing a lot of Mario Maker 2 stuff, and he'll talk about how somebody found some glitch, and they're like, "Oh, now we can use that glitch to do something new that we weren't able to do before," and that's part of these, and I forget what they're called, but these extremely challenging sorts of levels that use these very advanced techniques, like letting go of the green shell at exactly the right time so that you'll also jump and bounce and you'll jump higher, blah blah blah, or whatever. They have a particular name, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But if you're looking for stuff like that, that's a great place to look, because I'm sure he has covered some of these things. But yeah, he also talks about how frustrating it is that Nintendo is so closed about that stuff and will literally patch it out.
Yeah.
So that levels that used to be completable are no longer completable. Because they've removed the ability that made them possible. Yeah.
Well, the other notorious Nintendo game in this category that it sounds like with the modern version they've started to loosen the reins on a little bit is Smash, where they would do updates to the game, or the new one would come out and they just wouldn't give any statistical data about the game. The players would literally have to mine it all themselves, and at least now they're starting to reveal more, I guess. But I'm not a Smash player, so I can't say.
Yeah, I can't speak to it either. I've never really played, but I did have the Wii one, I guess. Anyway, all right, I will take the next one here. Tidbits from the Doom episode from Chris. It says, as a marathon partisan, this is addressed to me particularly because I guess I brought it up last time. As a marathon partisan, I have to mention that the open source Aleph 1 engine runs on modern systems. For roughly contemporary games that are often compared to one another, it's amazing how different Doom and Marathon are. Also, your brief aside about controls in first-person games from this era, Ultima Underworld, System Shock 1, reminded me that as late as 1996, Daggerfall had a default control setup that used mouse cursor-based movement. Fortunately, it also supported the modern mouse-look movement, unlike System Shock 1, which needed mods to do that. Great work as always on the pod, Chris. Yeah, I went looking for Marathon because I was curious how you would play it today, and I also found Aleph 1, but I appreciate that pointer. Aleph is Aleph, for those who aren't familiar. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It looks great. I mean, as great as it can look for a game that old, but you should... If you're curious about it, you can check it out, and it will run on Windows or whatever, so you're not locked to a Mac. I did spend a little time on that, and I think they have. I guess there were 3 Marathon games, 1, 2, and Durandal or something. So you can go check those out. I actually have never played Daggerfall, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, the controls in the first person games from this era could be odd. We're still figuring it out.
I have weird memories of Daggerfall specifically, so yeah, that's not surprising to me that it has that weirdness going on. Everyone's trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and trying to find something that feels natural with a device that was new to a lot of us. Right?
Yeah, mice. You're talking about mice?
Yeah. I mean, they go back a ways, right? Because they're a Xerox PARC innovation, but yeah, it's not something that was common to people, until the original Mac. So, and that's the mid to late 80s. So,
right.
Anyway.
Okay. Last one.
Second one for you. I have another email after that. It's also fairly short.
All right. Email to producer note. See what I mean when I say you asked for it. Subject: can of worms is opened from Ben Zaug. Another regular. Hey guys. You guys. I'm so used to saying hey guys. You guys have let Gothic Chocobo open the can of worms. While the EVs, here we go, were hidden from the player in earlier generations, they were known, at least in Generation 4, in parentheses, he says, I was too cool for Pokemon during Gen 3, so maybe then too. During Gen 4, I got heavily into competitive Pokemon using the website smogon.com, as well as a PC program, I forgot the name, that let me play competitive Pokemon against people building whatever team I want. This let me test out teams without having to grind them out in the game first. Once I found the team I liked, I then started breeding Pokemon to make sure that they had perfect 31 IVs, individual values, which a Pokemon is born with and cannot change. Then would start training the EVs that I wanted. I used Excel as well as a handheld number counter. Holy cow, where you push the buttons to increase it by one to make sure I got the 252 EVs, which gives the max stat boost for level 100 Pokemon. This often meant defeating 252 wild Pokemon with my Pokemon that needed training, hence the need for keeping track. Additionally, this 252 is just one stat. Holy cow. A second stat could have another 252 EVs put into it. Then there was 8 EVs, officially 10, but every 4 EVs gave you a +1 stat boost at level 100, or every 8 EVs for level 50, depending on the competition fight level. Do this for 6 Pokemon to maximize the stats that you want. To top it off, about every 2 to 3 weeks, I would get bored of my team, make another, and start the process over. Thanks, Ben from Iowa Zog. Holy cow, these mails have just, I don't even know.
I know.
That's great. Pokemon, people, Pokemon. See what happens, see what they've done. The biggest franchise.
I love the thought of him having a pitch counter. I think of it as a pitch counter, right? A handheld number counter. But for me, the only reason why I've ever seen one used is because of coaching baseball. Because you don't want your kid to pitch too many pitches in a game.
Yeah.
There's rules, but just like click to get to 252. Oh my God.
That was a solution. I mean, I guess it makes some sense, but it's like, that's some dedication. That's amazing. It reminds me of some old EverQuest stories I could tell someday. But
geez. Don't even.
But thank you to you both. We're going to close the book on the EVs, IVs, and Pokemon.
Yeah, they're going to put the lid back on the can of worms.
When did we play Pokemon? It was like
months ago. May? Yeah. It was quite a while ago.
It was maybe last year, but yeah. Feels so long ago. But yeah, we're gonna take a Pokemon break. But
it was maybe February. It was before Kingdom Hearts, so
okay, yeah.
So maybe the first one we played this year, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. The new one is coming out in the fall, so maybe a little bit will pop back up, but we'll try to stop it. The worms will
hold it. We'll hold it back. The producer will start filtering the mails. All right, last email will be quick. Through the Lava and Poison from Minotaurant, which is a funny name. Hello, Brett and Tim. I'm enjoying playing along this week. I'm not usually a big FPS fan, but both Doom and Dark Forces captured my attention. Old school charm goes a long way with me, I suppose. Although for both games, I think I spent more time being lost in corridors and looking for card keys than shooting anything. Still, I'm a patient gamer, and I recognize that these games are basically industry firsts, so I don't hold it against them too much. What did blow my mind in Doom is that the critical path often takes you through lava or poison. I really can't think of too many other games that say, it's fine to run through the lava, just do it quickly. Of course, you do spend a significant amount of time in hell itself, so I guess it's not too out of place. My question is, can you two think of any other memorable instances of level design where the player is required to go through something dangerous or lethal to move forward? Thanks again for the podcast. It's always the highlight of my week. Minotaurant. And then there's a PS asking about merchandise, which is something we really need to talk about one of these days. Mm-hmm. Anyway. I thought of Tomb Raider.
Okay.
There's places where you have to run through like traps, basically, that are firing at you. I feel like that's a thing. Actually, it's sort of a thing since I've been playing Samus Returns. That sometimes you have to pass through areas that have these sort of environmental
or whatever.
There's different things. There's one point where you have to like make your way through lava, even though it's doing a ton of damage to you the whole time, but the next boss is beyond it, so you have to go through it, or the next phase of a boss or something like that, or one of the Metroids. What else?
I feel like
a couple things that come to mind.
Mario's done something like that, but maybe not. Maybe they're pretty pure. That I think he has a good question. I think I'll have to think more about it. There's nothing coming to mind off the top of my head, but I think he makes a good point in that it's pretty negative reinforcement design is pretty, frowned upon generally. And I think, not to sort of like sorry, my dog is on the end of his rope. Not to give some more sort of credence to the sort of id folks were rebels of their time. But I think there was a bit of like, you know what, we're going to do what we want to do, conventions be damned. Not that there were a lot of conventions at the time, but I think it's safer back then, to kind of fool with stuff like that, where you're like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Why are you making me do this? And I think that, over time, we just found more ways to sort of make it safer to do it, Was it in Dark Forces? In the sewer level, did you didn't take damage in the sludge? I guess
I don't think you did. No,
there were just enemies in there. Yeah.
There were those enemies that popped up. What are they? Dagons or something?
Yeah. I think it's Dagons. Yeah.
So you were in danger more so than in most things, and it did kind of push you forward. So that was kind of maybe served a similar function because they're hard to see because they were popping up. Those are the sorts of things I could think of just kind of off the dome. It's just definitely interesting that the natural barrier is like sometimes there's been places where I've gone and just saved in Doom to be like, well, I wonder what's at the end of that tunnel of toxic sludge, and get through and like, oh, I see it connects to over here, and just reload because I'm just curious. But it does encourage that, like you can just kind of run around and do that, and that I think actually is another thing that, we probably won't get a chance to play any multiplayer, but it's a thing that I think multiplayer could make use of. It's like a good risk reward of like, maybe I want to run through that lava or sludge or whatever to get at a weapon that maybe nobody else is trying to go for because of the risk. And I also think they're often very good at making you have to go through it to find a button, for example, or then also maybe putting some health in there. So that you're going to go through it and they're going to be like, aha, we made you do it. And, here you have some health back. Sometimes they even feel snide and they'll give you like 2 1-point potions and you're like, dang it. So
yeah, he's right though. It is a curiosity because, I believe I'm usually, if I die, I almost always reload. But if you don't reload, you just start at the beginning of the level with some sort of standard,
start with the pistol.
Yeah, and so that's their backup, right? But it is unfortunate because you could be low on health and you'd hit essentially an A bug you couldn't finish, right? Because you couldn't get
right. But I think all the levels are meant to be able to be played starting from nothing.
No, I know, but I'm saying like you'd have to do that, right? You'd have to if you didn't have a save, you'd have to just start the level without your stuff. And you'd get your health back because you'd get a fresh start. But it's just not typical to have that situation happen.
Yep. Yeah, I think that also, with the levels being relatively short and meant to be short, and even like at the end of them taunting with you how long it took you, that it's really trying to encourage you to get better at that, and to treat the game as kind of a faster moving thing as well. So anyway, yeah, cool. Thanks for the emails. Again, those were all sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. You got the dog. That's all right. Next week, we're going to finish the original set of 3 episodes. So we'll do the 3rd episode. I will try to get on and stream that. This past week, I've been quite busy with chores since I've returned to Maryland. We are no longer in the same location. And after a couple days of just sleeping or trying to get back on a normal schedule, it turns out when you're away for a month, you end up with a lot of stuff you got to do when you get back. So I've been pretty busy, but things are settling down. So you'll be able to find me at twitch.tv/Brett Douville. We're also on Twitter, of course, at DevGameClub. I monitor that, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And, of course, you can find the show and its show notes at devgameclub.com. Thanks again for your emails and feedback via the iTunes podcasts app. And I guess we'll talk to you later. Have fun playing games this week. Good night.
Good night.